The mansion stood tall on the edge of the city, its windows glimmering under the morning sun like eyes that had seen too much. Behind those tall marble pillars and golden doors lived Ethan Cole, one of the youngest billionaires in the country. A man known for his sharp business mind, his luxurious lifestyle, and the air of mystery that surrounded him. But for all his wealth, Ethan's heart was quietly heavy. Money could buy him everything, except peace. Ever since his father passed away 2 years ago, his world had slowly begun to fall apart. His mother, Margaret Cole, once a strong and dignified woman, had grown frail. Her laughter had faded, replaced by the slow, painful silence of illness and loneliness. Ethan tried everything: the best doctors, private nurses, expensive therapies. But nothing seemed to lift her spirit. What she needed wasn't treatment. It was care. Someone who could bring back warmth into her lonely days. Someone who didn't see her as a burden, but as a human being. That's when Amara came into their lives. Amara was not what anyone expected when she walked through the towering gates of the Cole estate. She wasn't dressed in designer clothes or carrying polished manners like most employees the mansion had seen. She was humble, soft-spoken, and her dark skin gleamed under the sunlight as she stood nervously before the head housekeeper. Her resume was short, no fancy references, no elite service record, but there was something in her eyes that made people pause. They were kind eyes, the kind that saw beyond wealth and walls. When Ethan's mother first met her, she smiled faintly, something she hadn't done in months. "You remind me of my younger days," she said softly. "There's light in you." Amara blushed. "Thank you, ma'am. I'll do my best to serve you well." And she meant it. From the very first day, Amara treated the mansion not as a place of work, but as a home that needed love. She would open the curtains early in the morning to let the sunlight in, saying, "Light keeps sadness away, ma'am." She'd hum little gospel songs while cleaning, her voice soft and melodic, like the sound of calm rain. Margaret, who once refused to eat or talk, began to respond. She would ask Amara to sit with her for tea or tell her stories about Ethan as a child. "He used to pick wildflowers for me," Margaret would say with a weak laugh, "and he'd hide them in his school bag so no one would tease him." Amara laughed, genuinely touched. "He must have loved you a lot." Ethan would occasionally walk by those moments, quietly watching from the hallway. It was rare, the sight of his mother smiling, laughing, speaking with warmth. For months he had prayed to see that again. And now, somehow, this young woman, this stranger, had brought that light back. But Amara's kindness didn't stop at conversation. Every night before leaving Margaret's room, she would place a small folded note on the bedside table. Each one carried a handwritten message. Sometimes a quote, sometimes a prayer, sometimes just a simple reminder. You are loved. You are stronger than yesterday. Every sunrise means another chance to smile. Margaret collected those notes in a small wooden box by her bed. She told no one about it, not even Ethan. But he noticed that his mother's spirit seemed lighter, her voice less tired, her heart more alive. One afternoon, Ethan returned early from a business meeting. Exhausted, he took off his jacket and loosened his tie. As he passed by the guest wing, he heard a faint sound, humming. He stopped. The tune was familiar, a slow, soothing melody. He followed the sound until he reached his mother's room. Through the half-open door, he saw Amara kneeling beside Margaret's bed, carefully feeding her soup with the patience of an angel. Margaret's frail hand rested gently on Amara's arm. "You remind me of my own mama," Amara whispered softly. "She used to tell me, no matter how rich or poor a person is, kindness makes them royal." Margaret smiled faintly. "And she raised you well, my dear." Ethan didn't move. He stood there, hidden in the shadows, his throat tightening. For the first time in a long while, he felt something pure, something money could never give him. Gratitude. He realized in that moment that his mother wasn't lonely anymore. She wasn't surrounded by nurses who watched the clock, or maids who served without care. She had someone who truly saw her, someone who cared because she wanted to, not because she was paid to. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. He found himself thinking about Amara. There was something about her presence, gentle yet strong, that had begun to shift the atmosphere of the entire mansion. The staff were more cheerful, his mother more alive. Even the cold air of the marble halls felt a little warmer. He remembered something his father once told him. A home isn't built from walls, son. It's built from hearts. The next morning, Ethan saw Amara again, this time in the garden, helping his mother take a short walk under the rising sun. She supported Margaret with care, patient and steady. They both looked up as the first rays touched their faces. Margaret laughed softly, saying, "Look, Amara, the sky is blushing for us." Amara giggled. "Maybe it's just happy to see you outside, Mum." Ethan stood at a distance, smiling quietly. He hadn't seen his mother walk in weeks, and it wasn't medicine or therapy that gave her strength. It was the warmth of another human being. Later that day, Ethan called the head housekeeper. "Who hired the new maid?" he asked. "I did, sir," she replied. "Her references weren't impressive, but something about her felt right. I thought your mother might take to her." Ethan nodded slowly. "You made the right choice." He didn't say much else, but deep down, he knew Amara's arrival wasn't just good luck. It was grace. That evening, as he passed by the living room, he saw Amara dusting the grand piano. Her reflection shimmered in the polished wood. She didn't notice him watching, but he saw the small scar on her wrist, faint but real. He wondered what kind of past she carried, what kind of pain she might have overcome to wear such peace on her face. He didn't ask. Not yet. All he knew was that this woman had brought something back to his home that had been missing for years. Humanity. But what Ethan didn't know was that her kindness would soon uncover something darker, a truth hidden behind the diamonds and lies of his perfect life. Because somewhere else in that mansion, jealousy was brewing. A storm was rising, and Amara's gentle heart was about to be tested in ways she could never imagine. And when that storm hit, the billionaire would finally see who truly belonged in his world, and who never did. So Clara Beaumont was the kind of woman who could silence a room just by walking into it. Every strand of her golden hair seemed perfectly placed, every word she spoke laced with charm. She knew how to smile just enough to win hearts, and how to hide the sharpness behind that smile when it suited her. To the world, she was the perfect match for Ethan Cole. Beauty meeting power, elegance meeting wealth. Together, they were the dream couple gracing every magazine cover, every charity gala, every whispered headline. But behind closed doors, Clara's charm turned cold. She didn't love Ethan, not the way he thought. To her, he was a trophy, the final jewel in her crown of social status. She loved the way people looked at her when she walked beside him, the way his wealth opened doors she couldn't reach before. But Ethan's mother, Margaret, was an obstacle Clara never expected. At first, she played the role of the caring fiancée. She'd bring flowers for Margaret, flash her $1,000,000 smile and talk about wedding plans that Margaret barely had the strength to follow. But beneath the surface, Clara's patience was running thin. Margaret wasn't impressed by money or appearances. She saw through Clara's sweetness, and that unsettled Clara deeply. And then came Amara. The new maid's presence was like a quiet melody that filled the mansion, soothing, gentle, but impossible to ignore. Everyone noticed the change. Margaret was smiling again, even laughing softly at times. The atmosphere in the house had shifted from cold and distant to warm and peaceful. But Clara didn't like that one bit. Every time she visited, she saw Amara hovering near Margaret, adjusting her blanket, serving tea, or simply talking with genuine care. Clara would force a smile, but her jaw would tighten. In her eyes, Amara wasn't just a maid. She was an intruder. "Who does she think she is?" Clara muttered one evening as she poured herself a glass of wine in Ethan's study. Ethan, sitting behind his desk, barely looked up. "She's the new caretaker for my mother," he said calmly. "And she's been wonderful. Mom seems happier." Clara laughed bitterly. "Happier? Because of a maid? Ethan, your mother needs medical professionals, not sentimental charity." Ethan's eyes flickered up, a hint of irritation showing. "What she needs is kindness, something money can't buy." That remark stung Clara more than she let on. Her perfectly painted lips pressed together tightly. She wanted to argue, but she didn't. Instead, she changed the topic, as she always did when things didn't go her way. But inside, her resentment began to fester. The next afternoon, while Ethan was at a board meeting, Clara decided to pay a surprise visit to the mansion. Not to see Ethan, but to remind everyone, including Amara, who truly belonged in this world of wealth. When she entered Margaret's room, Amara was there, gently brushing Margaret's hair. The elderly woman looked peaceful, her frail hands resting on her lap. "Good afternoon, Mum," Amara said kindly. "Mr. Cole's mother just had her lunch. She's resting now." Clara crossed her arms. "You can leave. I'll take it from here." Amara hesitated for a moment. Something about Clara's tone didn't sound right, but she obeyed quietly and stepped back. As soon as the door closed behind her, Clara's fake smile dropped. "Well," she said, walking closer to the bed, "aren't you looking comfortable today?" Margaret blinked slowly, confused. "Clara, dear, what brings you here?" Clara sat on the edge of the bed, her perfume thick in the air. "I just wanted to check on you. It must be exhausting pretending to be so helpless all the time." Margaret frowned weakly. "Pretending? I don't understand." Clara's tone turned sharper. "You've been milking this poor health act for years, haven't you? Ethan spends his life worrying about you, when he should be focusing on our future." Margaret's frail hands trembled slightly. "Clara, that's not fair." "Fair?" Clara interrupted, standing now, her voice dripping with venom. "You've already had your life, your fame, your fortune. Why cling to him like this? Let the man live his life without this burden." Margaret's eyes welled with tears. "He's my son, Clara. And he's my fiancé," Clara snapped, stepping closer. "And you'd better not forget that." At that moment, Amara, who had been returning quietly with a tray of water and medication, stopped outside the door. She heard everything. Her heart raced. Then she heard something that made her blood boil. Clara picked up the water glass from the bedside table, her smile returning. But this time, it was cruel. "You look thirsty," she said mockingly, and handed the glass to Margaret. The older woman reached for it, her hands trembling. The glass slipped slightly, spilling a bit of water onto Clara's dress. Clara's eyes flared with rage. She snatched the glass back and slammed it down on the table, spilling water all over Margaret's blanket. "Oops," she said coldly. "Maybe you should be more careful. Or maybe you should have someone who actually knows how to take care of you." Amara's hand tightened around the tray. Her eyes filled with disbelief and anger. She stepped into the room, her voice steady but firm. "Miss Clara, please stop." Clara turned sharply, her blue eyes narrowing. "Excuse me?" "I said stop. Mrs. Cole doesn't deserve this." Clara laughed mockingly. "Oh, look who's talking. The maid with morals. Do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" "Yes," Amara said, her voice unwavering. "To someone who should know better." For a brief moment, silence filled the room. Even Margaret seemed too shocked to breathe. Clara's face twisted in fury. "How dare you?" "Miss Clara," Amara said softly, "you can be angry at me if you like, but please don't take it out on her." Clara glared, her pride wounded. "You'll regret that, girl." Amara didn't flinch. She turned to Margaret and gently dabbed the spilled water with a towel, whispering, "It's okay, Mum. Don't let her words hurt you." Clara stormed out, slamming the door behind her. The room fell silent again, except for the sound of Margaret's quiet sobs. Amara sat beside her, holding her trembling hands. "You don't have to explain, Mum. I saw everything, and I promise I won't let anyone hurt you again." Margaret's lips quivered. "Thank you, my dear. Thank you." Amara smiled faintly, hiding the anger burning inside her. She had seen cruelty before, but seeing it done to someone so gentle, so defenseless, made her heart ache. When Ethan returned home that night, he found Amara helping his mother sleep, her hand resting on Margaret's as she whispered a soft prayer. Ethan didn't know what had happened earlier that day, but something in Amara's eyes, the sadness, the quiet strength, made him feel that something wasn't right. He didn't know it yet, but the walls of lies in his mansion had just begun to crack. Because soon, the truth, cruel, ugly, undeniable, would come crashing down. And when it did, Ethan Cole's world would never be the same again. The night after Clara's cruel outburst, the Cole mansion was quieter than usual. The air felt heavier, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the tension that lingered from earlier that day. Even the soft hum of the chandelier lights sounded distant. Ethan Cole returned home later than planned. His day had been filled with meetings, deadlines, and the endless noise of people who wanted his attention. He had closed another multi-million-dollar deal, but there was no joy in it. Success felt empty when he knew his mother was still battling loneliness and frailty. As his car rolled to a stop outside the mansion, he loosened his tie and exhaled deeply. The grand house loomed before him, beautiful but lifeless, like a museum. But lately, he had noticed subtle changes. A softer energy, a flicker of warmth he hadn't felt in years, and every time he thought about that shift, one name came to mind: Amara. He didn't see her as just a maid anymore. She had become the quiet heartbeat of the mansion. She was the reason his mother smiled again, the reason laughter sometimes echoed faintly through the halls. Ethan didn't know much about her, but something told him she carried a rare strength, the kind that didn't shout, but healed. As Ethan stepped inside, the first thing he heard was a gentle voice humming from down the corridor. It was Amara's. The sound drew him toward his mother's room, his exhaustion melting into curiosity. Through the slightly open door, he saw Amara sitting beside his mother's bed, helping her sip some herbal tea. Margaret looked tired, her eyes puffy from crying. Was she crying again? Ethan thought, concern flashing through his mind. He knocked softly on the door before entering. "Mom, how are you feeling?" Margaret looked up, forcing a smile. "Oh, Ethan, you're home. I'm fine, darling. Just a little tired." Ethan walked over, taking her hand gently. "You don't look fine. What happened?" Before she could answer, Amara quietly stood, ready to leave the room. "I'll give you both a moment," she said softly. But Ethan stopped her. "No, please stay." His tone was kind but firm. "You've been looking after her better than anyone. If something's wrong, I want to know." Amara hesitated, glancing at Margaret. The older woman shook her head quickly, signaling her not to speak. "It's nothing serious," Margaret said, her voice trembling slightly. "I just spilled some water earlier. I'm getting clumsy in my old age." Ethan frowned. Something in her tone didn't sit right with him. He looked at Amara, who avoided his eyes. There was tension in her posture, the kind that came from holding back truth. "Mom," Ethan said gently, "has someone upset you?" Margaret squeezed his hand. "No, darling. You worry too much." He didn't push further, but deep down, he knew there was more to the story. He stayed with her until she drifted off to sleep, then quietly stepped out into the hallway. He found Amara standing there, her hands folded, eyes glistening. She looked like she wanted to say something but couldn't. "Amara," he said softly, "please tell me. Did something happen while I was away?" Amara hesitated. Her loyalty to Margaret weighed against her conscience. "Sir, it's not my place," she whispered. "Your mother doesn't want you to worry." "That's exactly why I am worried," Ethan replied. His voice was calm but carried authority, the tone of a man used to finding truth. After a moment, Amara sighed. "Maybe it's better if you see it yourself, sir." Ethan frowned slightly. "See what?" "The security footage," she said quietly. "From this afternoon. The cameras near your mother's room." Those words froze him. Minutes later, Ethan was in his private study, eyes fixed on the large monitor as Amara pulled up the footage from earlier that day. Her hands trembled slightly as she navigated the system. "There," she said, pointing. "That's when it happened." Ethan leaned forward. On the screen he saw Clara entering his mother's room, her expression all smiles at first, but within moments the mask dropped. He watched in stunned silence as Clara's tone turned sharp, her gestures aggressive. Then came the moment that made his stomach twist, the spilled glass, the cruel smirk, and his mother's trembling hands. Ethan's jaw clenched. His heartbeat thundered in his ears. "That's not all," Amara whispered, pressing play again. The footage continued. After Clara stormed out, Amara returned to the room, comforting Margaret like a daughter would. She dabbed the spilled water gently, whispering, "You don't deserve this, Ma'am. You remind me of my own mama. I'll protect you, I promise." Ethan leaned back slowly, his hands gripping the edge of the desk. His chest felt tight, rage and heartbreak colliding inside him. Clara, the woman he had planned to marry, had humiliated his mother. The same woman who had once taken her shopping, included her in every event, introduced her to friends as the sweetest mother-in-law to be. It had all been a lie. Ethan rubbed his face, his mind spinning. How long has this been happening? Amara shook her head. "I don't know, sir, but I've seen the way she looks at your mother, and at the staff, like we're beneath her." Ethan stood, pacing the room. "I should have seen it. I should have known." He turned toward Amara, his voice breaking slightly. "Thank you for showing me this. You could have stayed silent." Amara met his gaze, her eyes soft but steady. "Some things are too wrong to ignore, sir. Money and titles don't excuse cruelty." Her words cut through him like lightning, because they were true. He had built his empire on deals and numbers, but in doing so, he'd forgotten the simplest human truth. Character matters more than wealth. Ethan replayed the footage one more time, just to be sure his mind wasn't deceiving him. But the evidence was undeniable. Clara's sneer, the sound of the glass slamming, his mother's quiet sobs, they were burned into his memory. When the video ended, he sat silently for a long time. The only sound was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Finally, he looked up at Amara. "Don't tell anyone about this. Not yet," he said. "I'll handle it." She nodded. "Of course, sir." Before she left the room, Ethan spoke again. "Amara." She paused at the door. "I don't know how to thank you," he said quietly. "You did more than your job today. You protected my mother when I failed to." Amara turned, her eyes filled with compassion. "You didn't fail, sir. Sometimes it takes pain to open our eyes." Ethan watched her leave, the weight of her words settling deep in his chest. He turned back to the screen, staring at the frozen image of Clara's cruel face. For the first time, he saw her not as his glamorous fiancée, but as what she truly was, a stranger with a heart of ice. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He sat in his office, the glow of the monitor flickering on his face, planning what he would do next. There would be no shouting, no public scene, just truth. Because sometimes, justice didn't come from anger. It came from calm, quiet certainty. By dawn, Ethan knew what had to be done. The lies were over. The masks were coming off. And the next morning, Clara Beaumont would face the consequences of every cruel word she had ever spoken. The morning sun rose over the coal estate like any other day, but inside the mansion, the air felt charged, heavy, waiting. For the first time in a long while, Ethan Cole wasn't thinking about meetings or mergers. He wasn't thinking about profits, investments, or public image. He was thinking about betrayal. As he stood by the large window of his study, the reflection staring back at him hardly looked like the calm, composed billionaire everyone knew. His jaw was tight, his eyes colder than usual. On the table beside him lay a diamond ring, Clara's engagement ring, glimmering under the light like a cruel reminder of his mistake. He had spent half the night replaying the footage Amara showed him. Every time Clara's voice filled the room, mocking, cruel, demeaning his mother, his stomach twisted tighter. Every time he saw Amara's gentle kindness in contrast, his heart ached with guilt. He should have seen the truth earlier. He should have protected his mother sooner. Now, it was time to fix what had been broken. At precisely 10 in the morning, Clara arrived. As always, she made an entrance. Her heels clicked sharply against the marble floors, her perfume heavy and deliberate. She wore an elegant white dress, pure on the outside, poisonous within. "Ethan," she said brightly, walking into the study with a confident smile. "You called so early. What's going on? Don't tell me another crisis." He didn't return her smile. "Sit down, Clara." Something in his tone made her pause. There was no warmth, no affection, just ice. Still, she laughed lightly, brushing a golden strand of hair from her face. "Someone woke up on the wrong side of the bed, I said, sit down." His voice was low but firm, leaving no room for charm. Clara's smile faltered slightly. "All right," she said, easing into the chair across from his desk. "You're scaring me a little. What's this about?" Ethan looked at her for a long moment before speaking. "I watched something last night." "Oh?" she said, feigning curiosity. "One of those boring business documentaries again?" "No," he replied flatly. "A video, from the security cameras near my mother's room." For the first time, Clara's confidence wavered. "What kind of video?" she asked slowly. Ethan leaned forward, his voice steady but laced with anger. "The kind that shows you insulting my mother, humiliating her, throwing water on her." Clara's face went pale. What are you talking about? That's ridiculous." "I saw it with my own eyes," Ethan said, slamming his hand on the desk, the sound echoing through the room. Every word, every gesture, every cruel smile. Clara's lips parted, but no sound came out for a moment. Then her mask snapped back into place. She laughed nervously. "Oh, Ethan, you've got it all wrong. That maid, what's her name? Amara. She must have twisted the footage or something. You know how these people can be." "These people?" Ethan repeated, his voice dangerously calm. "You mean honest people? Kind people? The ones who actually have hearts?" Clara blinked, stunned by the tone she'd never heard from him before. "Ethan, you're overreacting. Your mother was being—" "Stop!" His voice cut through her like a blade. "Don't you dare finish that sentence." He stood, slowly walking around the desk until he was standing just a few feet from her. His eyes were sharp, not with rage, but with heartbreak. "I trusted you," he said quietly. "I let you into my home, into my family. I believed you loved me, and that you cared for my mother." "I do love you," Clara said desperately. "Everything I've ever done was for us." Ethan shook his head. "No, everything you did was for you." Clara rose from her chair, her voice growing frantic. "Ethan, you're throwing away everything we've built, our future, over a misunderstanding." He picked up the engagement ring from the desk and held it out. The diamond sparkled under the sunlight, cruelly beautiful. "Our future," he said bitterly. "There was never one, because love built on lies isn't love, it's greed." Clara's eyes filled with fury. "You're listening to that maid over me? Over me? I'm your fiancé, Ethan. That woman doesn't belong here. She's just—" "Enough!" Ethan's voice thundered through the room. He dropped the ring onto the table with a sharp clink. "Don't speak about her that way. She's worth more than every ounce of gold you wear." Clara's jaw dropped. For the first time, she realized she had truly lost him. Her voice turned venomous. "So that's it? You're throwing away a woman of class and beauty for some low-born servant?" Ethan's tone turned quiet, deadly quiet. "I'm letting go of a woman who doesn't know what kindness means. You humiliated my mother, Clara, the one person who gave me everything. I will never forgive that." Clara's face twisted with anger and humiliation. "You'll regret this, Ethan. You think you're making a noble choice, but one day you'll realize people like her will only drag you down." He didn't flinch. "The only thing dragging me down was you." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was electric, tense. Clara's chest heaved as she glared at him, her pride crumbling before his eyes. Then, in a final act of defiance, she snatched the ring off the table and threw it to the floor. "Fine," she spat. "Keep your precious maid and your sick mother, but don't come crawling back when you realize what you've lost." Ethan met her gaze one last time, his voice calm and final. "The only thing I've lost is a lie I should have seen through long ago." Clara's eyes burned with fury. "You'll regret this," she whispered, before storming out of the room, her heels clicking furiously against the marble floor. The front doors slammed behind her, the sound echoing through the halls like thunder. Ethan stood there for a moment, breathing heavily, staring at the doorway she had just left through. It felt surreal, like watching a storm finally leave after years of darkness. Then he looked down at the shattered ring on the floor, the symbol of everything false. He picked it up, held it for a second, then dropped it into the trash bin beside his desk. Silence filled the mansion again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was peaceful. Ethan walked toward his mother's room, his steps slow but steady. When he reached the door, he found Amara there, arranging flowers by the window. The sunlight hit her face gently, making her skin glow like bronze. She turned as he entered, her eyes widening slightly. "Sir, is everything all right?" she asked softly. Ethan took a deep breath. "It is now." He glanced toward his mother, who was resting quietly. "She's safe now. Clara won't come near her again." Amara lowered her eyes, whispering, "Thank God." Ethan studied her for a moment, This woman who had stood up for his mother when no one else dared, who had spoken truth even at the risk of her job. "Amara," he said quietly, "you've done more for my family than anyone ever has. You saw what I couldn't." She looked up, surprised. "I just did what was right, sir." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's what makes it extraordinary." As the afternoon sun spilled into the room, Ethan finally felt something he hadn't felt in years. Peace. The lies were gone, the poison removed. All that was left was truth, and the people who truly cared. And though he didn't know it yet, that truth would soon open a new chapter, one filled with compassion, redemption, and the unthinkable act that would change their lives forever. Because while the storm had passed, the real story of healing was only just beginning. The mansion had finally grown quiet after the storm. Clara was gone, her cold presence erased like dust after a long wind. But even as silence filled the air, a strange heaviness lingered, the kind that comes after heartbreak, the kind that makes every breath feel like a question with no clear answer. For Ethan, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was about guilt. He had seen the truth too late. His mother, Margaret Cole, lay weak in her bed, her once bright spirit dimmed by pain. Not physical pain, but emotional wounds that ran deep. He had built empires, conquered markets, and silenced competitors. But when it came to protecting the woman who raised him, he had failed. And that failure was eating him alive. Amara noticed. She noticed everything. In the days that followed Clara's departure, Ethan withdrew from the world. He barely ate. He ignored his business calls. He spent hours sitting by his mother's bedside, holding her hand, whispering apologies she was too fragile to answer. One evening, Amara entered the room quietly. She carried a bowl of warm soup and a soft towel, her movements gentle and respectful as always. Ethan was seated by the window, lost in thought, staring out at the dark gardens below. She hesitated before speaking. "Sir, you need to eat something." He didn't turn round. "I'm not hungry." "You've been saying that for days." Her tone was soft, but there was concern in her eyes. "Your mother wouldn't want to see you like this." Ethan sighed, his shoulders heavy. "I should have seen it, Amara. The way Clara treated her, the things she said. I was blind." Amara placed the tray on the table beside him and sat down quietly. "Sir, you trusted someone you loved. That's not blindness. That's humanity." He turned to look at her then, his blue eyes filled with pain. "But it cost my mother her happiness." Amara's expression softened. "Then give her that happiness back." Ethan frowned slightly. "How?" "By showing her she still has love around her. She still has family. She still has you." Her words struck something inside him, something he hadn't realized he'd lost. That night, Amara stayed longer than usual. She helped Ethan feed his mother, cleaned the room, and even told soft stories from her childhood to make Mrs. Cole smile. For the first time in weeks, the old woman laughed, a small, fragile laugh, but a real one. Ethan's heart swelled at the sound. He looked at Amara, really looked at her, the kindness in her eyes, the patience in her every gesture. There was something about her presence that brought peace into rooms where chaos once lived. When she finally rose to leave, he said quietly, "Thank you, Amara." She paused, smiling gently. "You don't have to thank me, sir. I just did what anyone should do." "Not everyone would have done what you did," he said. "You risked your job. You risked everything. For my mother." She lowered her gaze, humility shining through her words. "Sometimes the truth is worth the risk." That night, Ethan didn't sleep. He replayed her words again and again. Sometimes the truth is worth the risk. The next morning, Ethan made a decision that would change everything. He called the staff together in the main hall. The servants, gardeners, and helpers all gathered in surprise. No one had seen Mr. Cole this early in days. Amara stood quietly at the back, unsure why she was there. Ethan stepped forward, his posture strong, but his voice gentle. "There was injustice in this house," he began. "Someone innocent was mistreated. Someone who showed courage when I did not." The staff murmured among themselves. Ethan's gaze found Amara's. "That person is Amara." Her eyes widened. He continued, "She stood up for my mother when others stayed silent. She exposed the cruelty that had hidden behind smiles and wealth. And for that, I owe her more than words." Whispers rippled through the crowd. Amara looked down, overwhelmed. Ethan took a breath. "From this day forward, Amara is no longer a maid in this household. She will serve as my mother's personal caretaker, with full authority over her well-being and comfort." Amara's lips parted in shock. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," he said simply. "You've earned it." Tears welled up in her eyes, but she quickly wiped them away. "Thank you, sir. I'll do everything I can to make her happy." "I know you will," Ethan said, smiling faintly. "You already have." From that day on, Amara's role changed completely. She moved into a small room beside Mrs. Cole's suite and spent her days caring for her like a daughter would, reading to her, cooking her favorite meals, walking her in the garden when she felt strong enough. The bond between them grew deeper each day. Ethan often found himself drawn to the two of them, watching quietly from the doorway as his mother's laughter slowly returned, her spirit rekindled by Amara's warmth. One evening, as the three of them sat together in the garden, the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Mrs. Cole leaned back in her chair, smiling faintly. "Amara, my dear," she said, her voice soft, "you've done more for me than I could ever repay." Amara shook her head. "You don't have to, ma'am. Seeing you smile again is enough." Mrs. Cole chuckled. "Then let me tell you something. I see the way my son looks at you." Ethan nearly choked on his tea. "Mother!" Amara's cheeks flushed crimson. "Oh, Mrs. Cole." The old woman laughed gently. "Oh, don't act surprised, dear. A mother always knows." Ethan looked away, embarrassed but smiling. It was true. Something unspoken had been growing between them. Something pure. Something quiet. In that moment, Margaret Cole reached for Amara's hand and whispered, "You did the unthinkable, child. You brought love back into a broken home." Amara's eyes filled with tears. That night, when Ethan walked her to her room, he stopped at the door. "My mother's right, you know," he said softly. "About what?" she asked, smiling nervously. "That you did the unthinkable," he replied. "You changed everything." Amara looked into his eyes, the same eyes that once burned with pride, now softened with humility. "I didn't change anything, sir. You did. You chose the truth." He shook his head. "No, Amara. You were the truth." There was a long silence between them. Then, with a gentle nod, she stepped into her room. But before closing the door, she whispered, "Good night, Ethan." It was the first time she had ever said his name, and somehow, in that simple moment, he knew his life had changed forever. The next few weeks passed like a quiet sunrise after a long storm. The Cole mansion, once filled with coldness and whispers, now echoed with soft laughter, warm conversations, and the peaceful hum of life returning. The air felt lighter, brighter, as if the house itself had taken a deep breath after years of suffocating under pretense and cruelty. For Ethan, every day began and ended in the same place, by his mother's side. And every time he entered her room, he found Amara there, smiling softly, tending to her like she was her own mother. There was something extraordinary about the way Amara moved through the world, quietly, humbly, but leaving behind a trail of light wherever she went. Ethan often caught himself watching her, not out of curiosity, but gratitude. Gratitude for her strength, her honesty, and her heart. He knew now that love wasn't about status or luxury. It wasn't about expensive dresses or glittering diamonds. Love, real love, was in the way Amara spoke gently to his mother, in the way she remembered every small detail, in the way she saw people for who they truly were. One evening, the three of them sat together in the garden. The sky was painted with the last streaks of orange and pink, the air crisp and calm. Mrs. Cole was sitting in her wheelchair, wrapped in a soft shawl Amara had gifted her. Ethan sat beside them, watching his mother's face glow in the twilight. "You look stronger every day, Mum," he said with a smile. She chuckled softly. "It's because of her," she said, glancing toward Amara. "She's my medicine." Amara laughed shyly. "I just make sure you take your actual medicine on time." "No," Mrs. Cole said gently, her eyes glistening. "You've healed more than my body, child. You healed my heart." Ethan turned his gaze to Amara. "She's right. You've healed this home too." Amara shook her head. "I didn't do anything special, sir." Ethan smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong." There was a silence between them, a comfortable one, filled with unspoken feelings and understanding. The garden lights flickered on, casting a golden glow across the flowers. Fireflies danced between the trees, and somewhere in the distance, the sound of the city seemed to fade away. Then Mrs. Cole spoke again, her tone softer this time. "Ethan, my dear, you've built many things in your life. Towers, businesses, a name people fear to speak against. But do you know what you've never built?" Ethan looked at her curiously. "What's that, Mum?" She smiled faintly. "A home filled with love." Her words sank deep into his heart. "I see the way you look at her," she continued, nodding toward Amara. "You try to hide it, but a mother always knows. Don't let pride or fear stop you from what's real." Amara froze, her face turning crimson. Ethan rubbed the back of his neck awkwardly, glancing at her, then back at his mother. "Mom, please," he began, trying not to smile. She laughed softly. "Oh, don't mom me, Ethan. I'm old, not blind." Amara lowered her gaze, flustered but smiling. Later that night, as Mrs. Cole slept peacefully, Ethan and Amara found themselves in the quiet kitchen. The clock ticked softly, the sound of rain pattering against the windows. Amara was making tea, her favorite chamomile, when Ethan spoke from behind her. "My mother's right, you know," he said quietly. Amara turned, startled. "About what?" He stepped closer, his voice gentle but steady. "About the way I look at you." She blinked, unsure how to respond. "Sir, I don't think—" "Ethan," he interrupted softly. "Please, just Ethan." The way he said it, calm, sincere, almost pleading, made her heart tremble. He continued, "Amara, you've shown me what real strength looks like. You stood up for truth when no one else would. You brought light back into this house, into my mother's life, into mine." Amara's hands trembled slightly as she set the cup down. "I only did what was right." He smiled. "That's what makes it extraordinary." There was a pause. The rain outside grew heavier, drumming softly against the glass. Then Ethan took a deep breath and said the words that had been resting in his chest for weeks. Amara, I've spent my life surrounded by people who wanted my money, my power, my name. But you're the only one who's ever wanted nothing from me. And yet, somehow, you've given me everything. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan, I don't know what to say. He stepped closer, his voice barely above a whisper. Say you'll stay. Not as a maid, not as an employee, but as family. Amara's heart raced. Ethan, He reached out and gently took her hand. You don't have to answer now. Just know that this house, this family, will always have a place for you. Always. Tears rolled down her cheeks, but she smiled, a smile full of warmth, gratitude, and something she'd tried to hide for too long. I'll stay, she whispered. At that moment, the rain outside slowed to a drizzle, as if the world itself was listening and blessing what had just been spoken. Days turned into weeks. Mrs. Cole's health continued to improve, and her laughter once again filled the halls. Ethan returned to work, but something about him was different, gentler, more grounded. The ruthless businessman had found balance through compassion. And every evening when he returned home, he found Amara in the garden, tending to the flowers she and his mother had planted together. One day, months later, he walked outside holding a small velvet box. Amara was kneeling by the roses, her hands covered in soil. She looked up as he approached, surprised. Ethan, you're home early, she said, smiling. He knelt down beside her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. I wanted to ask you something. She blinked. What is it? He opened the box slowly. Inside was not a diamond ring, but a simple golden band, elegant and pure. Amara gasped softly. Ethan. He smiled. I don't want wealth or status to define us. I just want honesty, kindness, and love. The same things you gave us when we had none. Tears filled her eyes. You really mean this? He nodded. More than anything. In that quiet garden, surrounded by the flowers she had nurtured, Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. Mrs. Cole watched from the balcony above, smiling through joyful tears. It wasn't a grand ceremony or a glamorous affair, but it was real. It was love built on truth, compassion, and courage. As the sun set behind them, painting the sky in soft gold, Ethan whispered, You once said, the truth is worth the risk. You were right, because that truth led me to you. Amara smiled through her tears. And you showed me that even the most broken hearts can learn to love again. They stood together, hand in hand, the billionaire and the maid, not bound by status, but by the power of love, forgiveness, and truth. And from that day forward, the Cole mansion was no longer a house of silence and secrets. It was a home